Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Rooted Recovery Stories. No matter how you have come across our path and joined us for this vlog today, we are so glad that you've joined us. I hope you stick around after this brief message for our exciting story of hope and recovery right after this message. We are live in
Love Facebook.
where a number of people
The opportunity to share.
She's one of our own. It has been
They aren't like
parts to your story that's awesome. You found healing. You found,
until I got sober.
I can't wait for her to share the different aspects of your story and what. Awesome.
Right.
All right, welcome back, everyone, and thanks again for joining us. I'm so excited to introduce our guest today, Ryan, who joins us as well from Nashville, Tennessee. Ryan, welcome to Recovery Story. So glad to have you here.
Thanks, Patrick. Good to see you, as always.
Yeah, absolutely. As long as we've known each other, I have only gotten to hear bits and pieces of your story, so I'm super pumped to get to hear the whole thing today. And I'm really glad to have you here. So, with that, take it away.
All right, we'll do. I think anytime I'm asked to tell my story, I always get a little excited and a little nervous. Excited because it's really good to relive it, and I know how I was impacted by other people's stories when I was in early recovery, or even curious about recovery. Those were the most powerful parts for me to find it attractive. I get a little nervous because I can't believe who I used to be. And it says in the book, we will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. It's so true. I don't regret what brought me here. But sometimes it's hard to go back and look at those things and go, how did I do those things? And so I just really appreciate the platform, and I really hope that it resonates with somebody, anybody. And if it doesn't, it's helped me today. So thank you for
Absolutely.
So I'm from Nashville originally. I grew up in a upper middle class home, and I was the oldest of two boys, and we kind of had a full life. We played all the sports, and had a big family, big Catholic family, and my parents have been married, I want to say 45 years, and it was just a fairly stable home life. Grew up in Brentwood, Tennessee, just south of Nashville. So I always used to say I grew up on the mean streets of Brentwood. And it wasn't the Brentwood we know today, but it was definitely a nice part of town to grow up in. And went to a private school, Christian school, played sports my whole life, and really enjoyed a pretty happy childhood. It wasn't until later that I started doing some deep trauma work and like therapy to realize some of the things that happened to me that I didn't really understand had an impact on future things, and I'll talk more about that later. But I think it's interesting to what you think, and no one thinks you know yourself like you, right? And to be just so baffled about, like, whoa, I had no idea that thing I've been doing was directly tied to something that happened in my childhood. Like, it's mind blowing, and it's not to say that like that's the reason I'm the way I am. It's mostly just that's my journey, and that's how I coped.
Yeah.
I didn't have the tools that I have today, and the tools I have today are built on a combination of obviously abstinence from drugs or alcohol, but also working a program, having friends, and surrounding myself with people that are understanding of my journey and where I've been and that can relate to me. And then, also just the professional help of continuing to do more and more work on myself, that it's a never ending process. And I keep doing it because it's so rewarding. Not because I have to do it, So to go back, I remember one of the things I learned early on in my family as a survival technique was to make sure that the appearances were good. Like I appeared okay. Even
Mhm.
if we were pulling each other's hair out on the way to church, by the time we got out of the car, we were told, get your hair in place, tuck your shirt tail in,
That's
hold
right.
hands, front row. Um, and I learned, like, how to be a chameleon and to internalize feelings, and that it wasn't okay to to say that I'm scared or to say that I'm angry. And I'm supposed to just put that smile on and, like, we're on, and it became second nature for me. Um, and I believe in my story, what happened was it taught me, as I got older and things got darker, I had this, like, autopilot thing I've done my whole life that it was easy to fit secrets into. It was easy to fit, my addiction, my true feelings, the acting out I was doing. Like, it was easy to hide that because I always had that, go back to that smile and I'm good. And um and I think that's one of the reasons I was able to use and drink for as long as I did without having a big crash until, my 30s. And I started drinking when I was 14. I mean, we stole some liquor from my parents' liquor cabinet and jumped on the trampoline. I thought it was the coolest thing ever, and had a buzz for about 5 minutes, and then I was sick as a dog. And I remember that even as I was getting sick, thinking to myself, I can't wait to stop throwing up so I can do this again. It just had that effect on me, man. And it, I come to realize later that that's not normal. A lot of people,
Mhm.
like, if you ate something that made you sick, you're not getting sick saying, I can't wait to eat that again. Um, so that was the first time I drank, and it didn't really become a problem until I was 17. I dabbled in some drugs, and I drank some, but I was always playing sports. I played every sport under the sun, but I really liked playing basketball. And I always envisioned myself as, like, this 6'11", Tyson Chandler dunking, tomahawk dunking a basketball. And no one told me that I'm probably not going to get much taller than 6 feet, and that I'm pretty slow. And that really wasn't going to happen. My whole life was consumed around basketball and sports. And when I wasn't doing that, that's when I drank and used. And I had a sports injury when I was 17 that kind of abruptly ended my career. And then I didn't know who I was or what I wanted to do, so I thought I'd just party. And again, some reflection looking back, I didn't just want to party. I think that was my first attempt at medicating something that was probably a trauma, because I had spent my whole life and my identity being a certain kind of kid, certain kind of son, student, brother, and it was wrapped up in this identity of an athlete. And when that was taken away, I like to say I wanted to party, but I think what really was happening is that I was grieving and I was confused and lost. And that was the first of many times in my life where I turned to drugs and alcohol to numb it, you know. And I continued to do the things I was told. I went to college. I graduated in 4 years. I kept an academic scholarship while I was there. I don't know how. I drank and used drugs every day from the age of 17 all the way through college. I can't think of one day I didn't. Um, had friends, and had a pretty successful collegiate career. Got out of school and got a job in healthcare. And it was the best of times and the worst of times. So it was a very exciting job. It was in orthopedics, and I was traveling the country, and I had this big corporate expense account, and I was entertaining physicians in different cities and different nights. And so it was awesome. It looked cool for my parents. Like, look what I'm doing. I'm making some decent money. I'm working with spine guys and knee guys that are very prestigious hospitals. And that was that version of the story. And then the real version of the story is, after work, I'd find a doctor or two that drank like me at dinner,
Mhm.
who I thought might be interested in drugs. And then we'd continue the party till 2, 3, 4 in the morning. And that's when my addiction really started to snowball, because I was justifying my behavior at this point with work hard, play hard. I was comparing myself to my friends who were 23, 24. Some of them were still in college. Some of them never finished college. I was making a lot of money. I was rubbing elbows with some very important people. And this is what you do. You go out and you work hard and you get really drunk or high and do terrible things at night, and go to another city and do it again. And I spent about 2 years doing that. I met a girl in college. I dated a girl in college. I ended up marrying her right after, and we moved to Michigan together. We moved to DC together. We moved back to Nashville. When we moved back to Nashville, we found out we were having our first child, and I remember telling myself, like, okay, now you're about to be a dad. Playtime's over. You need to stop acting out, stop drinking. And I realized real quick that let me wait till the child actually comes, and then I'll stop, you know?
Yeah.
So, I didn't change my behavior. My daughter was born, and, you know, it added stress to my life. It didn't stop me from drinking. It actually picked up. And now I felt the pressure of never being a father before, not knowing what to do. I had more mouths to feed in the house. I was trying to keep up with the Joneses by having the right house and the right car that I couldn't afford, even though I was making good money. I wanted to have the appearance of making more than I was making. And I just continued to compound stress upon stress upon stress. And the only way I knew how to deal with it was to drink and drug and drink and drug. And that continued until we found out we were pregnant with our second child a couple years later. And it was the same story. I said, okay, this time I'm serious. Like, I gotta get a hold of this. And my son was born, and again, nothing changed. Never got in DUI, never got in any legal trouble. Somehow I would always explain it away to my family, to my work. If I was absent to a meeting or showed up smelling like something, I always had an excuse. So I never had any real consequences. It wasn't until I would say 2010, 2011 that the wheels really came off. And I had at this point started a company that we distributed these products that I'd been selling before. And our company had won an award. And the national award was to be given in Las Vegas, and we had this all expenses paid trip. So went out there. I spent 4 days in a hotel suite, never left the room once. Ordered drugs and women, spent $4,000. Never talked to my wife once. She was seeing ATM receipts and just so confused. And I finally came home and I confessed I've got a gambling problem. Never gambled once, but I figured it's Vegas and she's going to believe that, you know? And I remember on that flight home, coming up with this great story in my mind. I thought, I want to do what I did in Vegas every single day of my life. I just want to spend money and get high. And Nashville is not like Las Vegas. And it didn't take long before I tried to buy cocaine from the wrong person. Ended up getting arrested, and it was a perfect kind of arrest for me, because if it had just been a DUI, people would have expected me to get a DUI. I wouldn't have really had to change. I would have been like, yeah, you know, I was probably due one. But this particular arrest involved sex. It involved undercover cop. It involved cocaine. So all my secrets came out at once, and I could not control information anymore. Yeah. I had nowhere to turn except to go, all right, it's up. Here's the deal. And I had this light bulb moment where I go, you know, I'm an addict. I'm an alcoholic. And I went to treatment. I agreed to go to treatment. But, you know, the truth is I didn't want to go to treatment to get sober. I wanted to go to treatment to keep my house, to keep my company, to keep my wife, keep my kids, to look good. It wasn't about changing my life and being sober, nor was it about understanding the impact that all this stuff had on me. I was still under this illusion that, like, if I had this stuff, I could compare my outsides to your insides, and it just didn't work like that. But eventually, when I left rehab, my wife had filed for divorce, and I realized the reason I went to rehab to save all those things, I lost them anyway. And so I was forced to have a choice. Like, am I going to stay sober, or am I going to continue to do what I've been doing? And I didn't have it in me to continue to lose these things. And I thought I'd try something else. So I hung on, I got a sponsor, and I just said, what do I do? I didn't have a home to go home to anymore. I didn't have to like deal with my children at night or in the morning, and I didn't have a wife nagging me. I didn't have anything. It was just me, and I needed to make new friends that I had nowhere to go to. So I went to 12-step meeting after 12-step meeting, and I just met friends, and I just said, what are you doing after this? Like, just because I didn't want to be alone.
Yeah.
And they picked me up, and my best friend from growing up happened to be in recovery, and Darren, and Darren found me the day I got out of rehab and said, man, you look like shit, where have you been? And I told him, and he pulled up in this truck, and he just pulled out the AA big book, and he's like, get in the truck. And we've been inseparable ever since. It's been incredible to have friends that have been where I've been and experienced the loss and pain that I've experienced, and not to feel shame or guilt, but to see the hope and the experience that they have. And it's the only thing I can talk about is it's a miracle. And again, that's why I'm so glad to be able to talk about this, because I think people don't realize how things can turn around, and how small little changes that seem so big that really aren't that big, just don't pick up, don't use, how things that you think are unsolvable just get solved.
Yeah. So true. One of the things, question that sparked for me when you were talking about, for your story of, going through young adulthood and in college, your story is a little bit different than a lot of ours, where, you went through college and you were able to make it through, graduate, right? Like under the radar. And so I'm curious about what, during that time being, what we say, highly functional, because you're active addiction every day, right? But, you made it through and continued on, got a good job, and didn't escalate to I guess what we would call unmanageability, until afterwards, and what was the narrative going through your head? Clearly you were in active addiction already, in college, your late teen years. Would you say you were in total denial that whole time? Or did you have some type of awareness that you were like, I'm just going to ride this thing out until I can't ride it anymore?
Yeah, I think it was a combination. I think there was certainly a high level of denial, because I really didn't know. I had this idea that an alcoholic was homeless and under the bridge. I had no idea that you could like be an executive for a big company and have a drinking problem. I just thought maybe you drank a lot, but like, how could you have a drinking problem when you have all this stuff? And so that was the biggest problem for me, is that I didn't realize how much of a problem it was for me. And I also didn't know what an alcoholic really looked like. Because what it costs us, it costs people different things, right? So just the way you described me is kind of high functioning. I mean, maybe I was higher functioning than some people, but I was certainly held back tremendously by my drug use and drinking. The denial part is I didn't see it. I couldn't correlate. Like if I graduated in 4 years and had a 3.1 GPA, what could I have done if I never picked up? Where would I be? What kind of relationships would I have had? What would my friends be doing? Like it's hard to say. What I can say today, it gives me so much peace, is I know that no matter how bad it gets, it can only get worse if I pick up or use today. And so I'm always okay if I don't pick up and use. And the way that I know that is because I tried like hell to sabotage my life for 17 years and I still couldn't do it. I was broken, but I wasn't shattered. I was able to be repaired, and it was ugly sometimes, and it was very scary. But at the end of the day, like even at my best and worst efforts to ruin my life, it still took the direction it needed to take to get me to where I am today.
Okay, 2 follow-up questions. What was one pivotal point you can think of that happened to you without which you probably would not have ended up getting and staying sober? And then what is one thing that you did or participated in, a choice you made that was also pivotal in that process for you?
So I think that there's one moment, one night that came to mind. It's still really fresh for me. It's the night that I left rehab and got home thinking I was going to have a hero's welcome, for completing a program. And
Mm-hmm.
I go to work and people are so happy to see me and telling me how I look better and my eyes are clear. And this strange guy walks in and says, "Are you Ryan Kane?" I said, "Yeah." And he's like, "You've been served." And it was divorce papers. And man, my instinct, I knew exactly where I was going to go and what I was going to do, who I was going to call, how much I was going to do, all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that moment was the huge pivot for me because I instead went to this house off Franklin Road at 1 o'clock where they meet every day of the year. And I told everyone, I couldn't wait to share, to tell them, "Hey, let me tell you what just happened," thinking that everyone's jaws are going to drop. And like, everyone's like, "Oh yeah, getting divorced." Yeah, it happens.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Wait, what?" Like, no one's as upset as I am. And that was one moment where I had this choice to make, and I didn't make the same choice. I did just something different right there. And I don't know how that happened. It just did. The other thing was when I was working the 12 steps as part of the result of my arrest. I had this pending court case, and a detective that was a complete prick to me, threatening, lots of jail time and fines and all this stuff. And I had been working this program, and my sponsor says, "Hey, you should pray for him every night." And I was not a prayer. I was very resentful against the church, and
Yeah.
I said, "I don't want to do it." And he said, "Just do it." So I would pray and pray and pray. And every day I'd talk to my sponsor. He'd say, "Did you pray for Detective so-and-so?" And I said, "Yeah." And the day of my court date, I get a call on my way up to the courthouse on my cell phone from the detective. And he asked me to stop in to see him before I went into court. And I walked in, and I don't know how to describe it other than he was a different human being. And he said, "Listen, man, we play this game of cat and mouse, and I don't dislike you." And he said, "In fact, my brother's in recovery." And he goes, I really see a lot of hope for you, and I think you can help a lot of people." And he said, "We're going to give you this plea deal and no jail time." And he's like, I want you to remember this moment so you can carry the message and help other people." And at that moment for me, that was such a pivotal moment because I believed in the power of connecting with God, not because of the outcome, but just because it was something that I could never have envisioned, and I can't understand to this day. And that's the beauty of it is I'm very comfortable not understanding. I just know it works. I don't know why it works. I just know
Mm.
it works. And I can go back to that moment when I'm just so certain that something's going to turn out a certain way. But if I just listen to someone I trust and take their advice, that things tend to work out the way they're supposed to.
That's awesome. Wow. That's super powerful. I had not heard that part of your story before. And
Yeah.
man, I love, I hear stories every now and then of people's sponsors having them do certain things like that, having us pray for people we really don't want to pray for. Uh, but that's really cool. Really, really cool. All right. So, what would you say, life today? What would you say is three of your, gosh, if you had to list your top three things that making the right choices and, doing recovery and sticking with it, what are the top three things that you're grateful for that you wouldn't have without having gotten sober?
Yeah, I think the first thing is I wouldn't have a relationship with God. I'd have no spiritual life. And that's everything to me because it's an awakening. They talk about the 12 steps, and the 12th step is having had a spiritual awakening. And I love that part because it's the first, I don't know, 34 years of my life, I was asleep. I don't know how I got where I got. It was just mindless nonsense. And I look back at this, like I said at the beginning, it's a stranger's life. And I'm awake and I make choices. And I can only say it's because I have a trusting relationship with someone that's not me. I think the second thing that I'm grateful for is the relationships. I have such a full life. I have so many people. I mean, so many people that I say I love you to. It's huge, and it feels so good because I mean it, and I don't need. It's not because they write me checks or give me nice cars. It's
Mhm.
because I care for them and they care for me, and I know if I needed them, I can call. And I think the last thing that I'm grateful for is now I have a purpose. Um, just waking up every day and knowing who I am and why I went through what I went through. I feel sorry for people who haven't been broken, because now that I have, I'm like, God, it was so painful to go through. And I'm so grateful because now I know who I am and what I'm here to do. And there's nothing that can fill you up more than that, just peace of mind that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be.
So true, man. I talk about this almost every time I do one of these uh, stories, interviews, that I get so excited and pumped up and fired up about recovery, from doing an out, sitting down and just hearing somebody else's story. And I know that this does the same thing for other people, which is what I love doing this every week, because I think there's so very much power in it, and ability to change other people's life. And so, with having said that, kind of the last thing I like to ask our storytellers is, to that person, man or woman, that is listening, struggling the same way you did, potentially at really good school, maybe a senior about to graduate, thinking they got a job lined up, thinking they're flying under the radar, but miserable inside, being a chameleon. What would you, you had a word of encouragement to leave them with today, what would you say?
I would say that it's really scary, to know deep down who you are and who you're appearing to be, and knowing that like the things that you do every day aren't the person that you're meant to be. And that if I asked anybody to just trust that it gets better if you just stop doing one thing. And like I said, it's so scary, but just having that little inkling of trust, that's what it's all about. It's just believing that maybe it could be a little bit better than it is. And the change that we're talking about isn't as scary as it sounds. Um, there's been millions of us that have done this. We didn't invent this thing, and it's done by choice. And we always talk about pain, and if it doesn't hurt enough, you're not going to change,
Mm.
until you can't take the pain anymore. And my hope for people is they don't have to hit that rock bottom that everyone talks about. Like if we can lift that bottom up, so my message to a newcomer is always like, why wait? If you already are here and if it's even going through your head, you probably belong. You know what I mean? So take an action. That's brave and it's hard.
Man, I couldn't agree more. So, talking about taking action, um, you tell us a little bit. I want our listeners to hear a little bit about your hat. It stands for NRC, the Nashville Recovery Center, which is a wonderful program you have poured a lot of your heart and soul into, that's making a huge difference and impact here in our city. And so, just for people listening, I'd love for you to share a little bit about what y'all are doing to change the world of addiction right now.
Yeah, we started Nashville Recovery Center a few years ago, and the original purpose was to just have a giant recovery community in the middle of Nashville for all of our friends and people that are curious about recovery to come find a place to gather, to have sober events and concerts and watch games and sports and play pool and have coffee and meet with your sponsor. And it evolved into more community plus treatment. So we started doing some outpatient treatment programs and some sober living, and now we have kind of a hybrid of clinical programming as well as a public facing community. And what's really neat about it is that a lot of the newcomers that are doing outpatient treatment or doing sober living with us can connect with people that are coming there that are in longer term recovery, and really doing the one thing that we know is so critically important is connection. And during this pandemic, it's been really tough to connect, and these meetings and Zooms are great, but we all know how important human connection is. And ultimately, once this thing gets past us, we're excited to have reopen and have 12-step meetings again and events. And I've got some awesome pictures of you from past events we've done together there, and
Yeah.
I hope we do a lot more soon.
Absolutely. Like I said, we just love you guys at Promises and are so grateful to have you, as a community partner, and for all the wonderful things you're doing for, the recovery community here. For anybody listening that wants to, connect with y'all, what do you want to share your website or phone number or any resources?
Yeah, you can go to NashvilleRecoveryCenter.com, or you can check out our Facebook page, Instagram, something like that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thanks again, Ryan, so much for being on here today. It's been really great. I appreciate you as a brother in recovery and friend, and I'm really, really glad that we've gotten to walk the road of recovery alongside each other, and our paths crossed when they did. So it's exciting to walk this road for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I really appreciate you letting me get on here today to talk about my story.
Absolutely. Well, final thought I always like to leave with everyone is remember to be kind. Please be kind to one another and take care of yourselves. And if you are struggling, the one thing that I would ask that you do is to just tell someone, if that's the only thing you do today. All right. With that,